When you think Quentin Tarantino, you think razor-sharp dialogue, explosive violence, and deep cinematic love letters to genre films of the past. But if there's one genre that's buried deep in his creative DNA, it's the spaghetti western. Tarantino has championed the spaghetti western like a personal gospel, not just the big names like Leone and Corbucci, but also the deep cuts, the dusty gems, and the political powder kegs. These are the movies that made Django Unchained possible, that echoed through the Hateful Eight, that turned gunfights into ballet. So saddle up, we're counting down Quentin Tarantino's top 20 favorite spaghetti westerns, a list packed with outlaws, machine guns, revolutionaries, and more than a few morally questionable bounty hunters. Starting with number 20. Number 20. Machine Gun Killers, aka Gatling Gun, aka Damned Hot Day. 1968, directed by Paolo Bianchini, is an Italian spaghetti western. It's a lesser-known entry into the genre, but it packs enough stylistic flair, political subtext, and pulp violence to have left a quiet but definite impact on later filmmakers, including Quentin Tarantino. Number 19. Viva Django, also known as Django Prepare a Coffin, directed by Ferdinando Baldi, 1967, is a film Quentin Tarantino has shown a deep appreciation for, even calling it one of the best Django movies aside from the original. It is the unofficial sequel to Sergio Corbucci's Django. Terence Hill steps into Franco Nero's coughing dragon boots. Tarantino is on record saying he prefers this to many of the later Django knockoffs. This was a huge influence on Django Unchained, where Jamie Foxx's Django also transforms from a victim into a calculated gun-wielding force of vengeance. The haunting theme of Viva Django, Last Man Standing by the Ribéry brothers, was used by Tarantino on the Django Unchained soundtrack. That iconic track plays during the slow-motion bloodbath near the film's finale. Number 18. The Ugly Ones, directed by Eugenio Martin, 1966. Starring Thomas Millian and Richard Weiler, the film is a quiet cult favorite, not flashy like Leone's work, but raw, character-driven, and psychologically rich, which is exactly why Quentin Tarantino has praised it. What unfolds is a taut game of shifting loyalties, psychological manipulation, and moral ambiguity, a proto-revisionist western with barely a clear-cut good guy. Number 17. Tipepa, directed by Giulia Petroni, 1968. This spaghetti western is one of the boldest, most political, and blood-soaked entries in the Zapata western subgenre, and it's easy to see why Quentin Tarantino has a particular affection for it. He's praised it in interviews, and once called Thomas Millian's performance in the film one of his all-time favorites. Orson Welles plays Colonel Cascaro. What unfolds is a political and psychological triangle, dripping with betrayal, colonial critique, and explosive violence. Number 16. Shoot the Living, Pray for the Dead, directed by Giuseppe Vari, 1971. This spaghetti western is a cold, stylish, and deeply atmospheric spaghetti western that Quentin Tarantino has championed for its bold mood, minimalistic tension, and vibe-first storytelling. It's one of those underseen genre pieces that Tarantino loves to excavate, and he's praised it as a noir-tinged, slow-burn western that delivers a heavy dose of cool. Starring Klaus Kinski and Paolo Casella, the story kicks off with a bank robbery gone wrong. A gang of outlaws led by the ever-sinister Dan Hogan, played by Klaus Kinski. As the gang grows restless and paranoia simmers, the story slowly unravels into a revenge-fueled standoff with secrets, betrayal, and a lot of staring down the barrel of a gun. Number 15. The Grand Duel, 1972, directed by Giancarlo Santi, is one of the final gems of the spaghetti western era, and it's one that Quentin Tarantino has proudly worn in a cinematic sleeve. From the music to the mood, The Grand Duel has Tarantino DNA all over it, and for good reason. Directed by Giancarlo Santi, the assistant to Sergio Leone on The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and Once Upon a Time in the West. Starring Lee Van Cleef, with music by Louis Bacalov. Tarantino uses the title soundtrack in Kill Bill Volume 1, a great song. Number 14. The Great Silence, 1968. Directed by the one and only Sergio Corbucci, is not only one of the most powerful and bleak spaghetti westerns ever made, it is also one of Quentin Tarantino's absolute favorites, and is cited as a major influence in The Hateful Eight. Set in a snowbound Utah just before the turn of the century, the story centers on a mute gunslinger named Silence, played by Jean-Louis Trintignant, who protects persecuted outlaws targeted by bounty killers. His main adversary is Loco, played by Klaus Kinski, Kinski, a cold-blooded bounty hunter who uses the law as a shield for murder. Silence is hired by a widow to avenge her husband's death at the hands of the Loco, setting off a tragic chain of events. The film famously ends on a brutal nihilistic note, defying genre expectations. Number 13. The Dirty Outlaws in 1967, directed by Franco Rossetti, is one of the nastier, grittier, and more morally ambiguous spaghetti westerns of the 1960s, and it's one that Quentin Tarantino has openly praised as an underrated classic of the genre. Raw, cynical, and soaked in double crosses, this film embodies everything he loves about the dirtier corners of Euro-Western cinema. Riz Ortolani did the score, which you've heard in other Tarantino films, specifically Django Unchained. Number 12. A Pistol for Ringo in 1965, directed by Duccio Tessari, is one of the most charming, slick, and genre-defying early spaghetti westerns, and it's a film that Quentin Tarantino deeply admires. Unlike the later, grimier entries in the genre, this one is playful, fast-paced, and stylish. The movie stars Juliana Gemma, also music by the one and only Ennio Morricone. Number 11. The Big Gundown, directed by Sergio Salima, 1966. Sergio Salima, one of Tarantino's favorite spaghetti western directors, and The Big Gundown is his crown jewel. If you're building a list of spaghetti westerns that actually influenced Tarantino's filmmaking, The Big Gundown is going to be on the list. This one doesn't just have shootouts and grit. It has politics, moral complexity, and style for days. The movie stars Lee Van Cleef and Thomas Million, with the score by the one and only Ennio Morricone. Number 10. The Return of Ringo, 1965, directed by Duccio Tessari, is the spiritual successor to A Pistol for Ringo, but tonally and thematically it's a whole different beast. While the first Ringo film was breezy and lighthearted, The Return of Ringo is Shakespearean, brooding, and deeply political, and that's exactly why Quentin Tarantino loves it so much. It's part revenge western, all filtered through the stylized, operatic lens of 1960s Italian genre cinema. The movie stars once again Giuliano Gemma, with music again from Ennio Morricone. Tarantino has long championed this movie, screening it at his festivals and referencing it when talking about the emotional power of spaghetti westerns. Number 9. Navajo Joe, directed by Sergio Corbucci, 1966. Navajo Joe is Sergio Corbucci's grindhouse western, and Tarantino has made no secret of his obsession with it. This isn't a Leone-style mythic opera. It's lean, mean, and angry, and at the center of it all is Burt Reynolds, in a role that Quentin Tarantino has described as pure movie cool. Tarantino has said that this was the most violent movie made until The Wild Bunch in 1969, directed by Sam Peckinpah. Tarantino is a huge fan of this one, and even used the theme song in Kill Bill Volume 2, which is how a whole new generation got introduced to it. It has one of Ennio Morricone's most primal and aggressive composition. QT loved it so much, he dropped it in the Kill Bill Volume 2 during the bride's flashback and the ending finale when she finally kills Bill. Corbucci believed that the world was crap and violence was inevitable. Navajo Joe is a living embodiment of that. Number 8. Death Rides a Horse, 1967, directed by Giulio Petroni, is one of the quintessential spaghetti western revenge films, and Quentin Tarantino worships it. It's stylish, brutal, soaked in Ennio Morricone's thunderous score, and packed with themes that Tarantino would later rework in his own films. The movie stars Lee Van Cleef and John Philip Law. Direct inspiration to Tarantino is the mentor relationship between John Philip Law and Lee Van Cleef's character, which you can see in Django Unchained. The film opens with a massacre. A gang of outlaws murders a family, while a young boy hides in terror. The boy grows up to be Bill, played by John Philip Law. 15 years later, Bill sets out to find and kill the men responsible, but along the way he crosses paths with Lee Van Cleef. The two form an uneasy alliance, part mentorship, part rivalry, as they cut a bloody path towards revenge. Number 7. This film is probably the most influential in Django Unchained, with uncanny similarities to the plot of the young nobody being trained to become a ruthless bounty hunter. Day of Anger, 1967, directed by Tonino Valeri, is a straight-up Tarantino favorite, and it's easy to see why. The film is part coming-of-age western, part revenge saga, and all swagger. It features Lee Van Cleef in top form, a killer theme by Riz Ortolani, and a story that practically drips with a kind of cinematic machismo, moral ambiguity, and righteous rage that Tarantino thrives on. The film also stars Lee Van Cleef and Giuliana Gemma. This is one of the greatest mentor-student arcs in Western cinema, and it clearly influenced influenced Tarantino's work, especially in Django Unchained. Lee Van Cleef is the cool, charismatic killer who shows Giuliano Gemma the ropes, but he's also molding him into a mirror of himself, but with a dark twist. The teacher is also the final enemy. Number 6. The first entry from a Sergio Leone movie. This one is A Fistful of Dollars. 1964 is ground zero for the spaghetti western explosion and a key film in Quentin Tarantino's cinematic DNA. Directed by Sergio Leone, starring Clint Eastwood and scored by Ennio Morricone, this was the film that rewired the western genre forever, and Tarantino has never been shy about its influence on his own work. Quentin Tarantino has described the film as one of the coolest movies ever made. It blew his mind as a kid and reshaped his ideas about cinematic heroes, music, violence, and style. Number 5. Once Upon a Time in the West. 1968 is Sergio Leone's operatic masterpiece and one of Quentin Tarantino's most beloved films of all time. If A Fistful of Dollars was the raw, gritty prototype of the spaghetti western, Once Upon a Time in the West is the mythic, symphonic farewell to the entire genre. Starring Henry Fonda, Charles Bronson, Claudia Cardinale, and Jason Robards, with the score from Ennio Morricone once again. This movie isn't just a western, it's a funeral for the genre itself. The old gunslingers are dying. It's Leone saying goodbye to the mythology of the West. Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood has the exact same DNA. It's about a changing world, an aging hero, and the end of an era. Even the title is Leone's. Number 4. The Mercenary. Directed by Sergio Corbucci, 1968. While The Great Silence is grim and operatic, The Mercenary is fun, fast, and explosive, blending action, comedy, and political commentary without ever getting bogged down. Tarantino has praised how this film shows Corbucci's versatility, crafting something that's smart and exciting. Quentin Tarantino is obsessed with the memorable villains, and Jack Palance's Curly, which is exactly the kind of over-the-top bad guy Tarantino loves. Curly is one of the great spaghetti western villains. He's evil, but totally theatrical. Tarantino pays homage to Curly's death scene in Django Unchained with Calvin Candy's death. The showdown in the bull ring is one of the most iconic in spaghetti western history. Tarantino has said it's as good as any Leone finale. Stylish, suspenseful, and visually inventive. It's the song Leorina by Ennio Morricone in the coffin sequence in Kill Bill 2. Number 3. Django. Directed by Sergio Corbucci, 1966. When Sergio Corbucci made Django, he took everything Leone had done in The Fistful of Dollars and pushed it into the mud. Literally. The film is grimy, brutal, nihilistic. Tarantino has said that it felt like a punk rock spaghetti western, a movie that ripped the genre wide open. If Leone made the genre popular, Corbucci made it dangerous. Number 2. For a Few Dollars More, 1965. The sequel to A Fistful of Dollars. For a Few Dollars More is a cornerstone of the spaghetti western genre, and for Quentin Tarantino, it's one of the most influential films ever made. It takes everything great about A Fistful of Dollars and refines it, adding more complex characters, a bigger scope, and an epic feel. Tarantino's admiration for this film is clear when you just look at how it influenced his style, characters, and even his narrative choices. Number 1. I think you guys saw this one coming. Tarantino's number 1 favorite spaghetti western film of all time is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, directed by the one and only Sergio Leone, 1966. This isn't just Tarantino's favorite western, it's his favorite movie of all time. We won't even get into it. Let's just play what Tarantino has to say about it.
Is The Good, Bad, and the Ugly still your favorite movie by anybody else?
Oh yeah, no, The Good and the Bad.
It really still is.
Oh yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I really do think, I mean, I love the whole canvas that movie takes place on. I love the performances and how that story is told over the course of time. But until that whole long story, and then they get to that bull ring, you know, with that shootout and that music and that sequence, I really think that is the best moment in the history of cinema. I really can't imagine anybody ever topping it.